Thank you very much for coming up to Whyalla and coming out and seeing Point Lowly.
My pleasure.
What do you think of Point Lowly?
Well, I can understand now why the people of Whyalla are saying that they don't think that's a great spot for massive industrial development. Sure, there's one facility ended up there in the 1980s, but it is the beach that Whyalla people rely on. It's a much better beach than you've got here in town. But also, people have started to associate with the cuttlefish. It's become an icon species for Whyalla. And here you've got this major industrial development, whether it's a desalination plant or an ore exporting wharf, right in the middle of their habitat. And I can see why Whyalla people are very concerned about this industrialisation of their backyard.
Yes. A lot of people have seen the amount of red dust and the environmental damage done by One Steel, and also the amount of land and destruction done by Santos. And we're afraid that if these plants go ahead, that sort of damage will be scaled up and will have a major effect on the peninsula.
Well, certainly people here in Whyalla have experience with industrialisation, but they're not a people who are afraid or scared of industry. I mean, most people here rely on industry, either directly or indirectly, and I think that means that we should pay even more attention when people from an industrial background are saying that industry has its limits, that environment sets some barriers beyond which industry should not go. And that's why the Point Lowly position is such an interesting one, that in industry-friendly Whyalla citizens are saying, don't go there. We want development, we want industry, but not there. Put the industry somewhere else where it's not going to harm the cuttlefish, not going to harm the marine environment, and not going to interfere with one of the best recreational assets that the city of Whyalla has.
Absolutely, yes. And there are areas here that are set aside for industrial development, and the people of Whyalla feel that that's where the industry should go. And particularly with the desalination plant, we're very, very uncomfortable about the idea of burning fossil fuels. We feel that if you're going to go desalination, and it should not be a first resort but a last resort, it should be powered by renewable energy. And if it was sited on the other side of the Gulf, we'd be able to have an ocean outfall, and also we've got plenty of wind there, so we could have wind power.
Well, it's one of the classic ironies, isn't it, that why are we in a water crisis? Well, climate change is one reason. Why do we have a problem with climate change? We've been burning fossil fuels. So what's the solution? Burn more fossil fuels to desalinate water to help get us out of the water crisis brought about by climate change. So it's sort of a tragic circular argument in a way, but desalination is a useful technology. It has its place, but you're right, it should be a last resort, not a first resort. We know that in most areas, whether it's Adelaide or even here in Whyalla, there is as much water falling from the sky, which could be caught locally, and as much water that goes out in waste that we could be recycling, that we don't actually need desalination. Certainly Adelaide doesn't need it, and I doubt very much whether Whyalla needs it as well. So desalination, yep, keep it up your sleeve, last resort, not first resort. And if you do go ahead with it, you've got to set some conditions. Condition number one, no greenhouse gas emissions from the desalination process.
Absolutely.
And that means
yes,
100% new renewable energy. Don't just pretend that you're buying from some wind farm down the road, because someone else has already bought that. You need new renewable energy. And you've also got to make sure that you don't harm the marine environment, and that's where the cuttlefish come in as well. So, yep, keep desalination on the table, but don't make it a first resort.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I know a lot of people are expressing concern that where we've got this water crisis, and this is with desalination, that the Premier wants to put, another 500,000 people into South Australia?
Well, there's some interesting questions about why the government has such a large population increase as it's
on its agenda.
On its agenda, it's part of the state strategic plan in the driest state, in the driest inhabited continent. There's questions to ask about why we're doing that. But given that the government is going down that path, and we know that climate change will mean less rainfall, and even if it's only a small amount of rainfall reduced, runoff disproportionately reduces as well. So we know that we're going to have less available water. We've got to use the water we've got even smarter. And if what we do is say, well, we have to have business as usual, we have to be able to water our European gardens and our lawns and wastewater like we always have, well then of course desalination is where you end up. But we can be much smarter. demand management is always the best way of saving anything, whether it's water or energy.
Well, conservation.
Yeah, conservation, that's right.
Yes.
You manage people's demand. And if people have more realistic demands for water, more in tune with the climate that we've got, then you're part way there. You don't need desalination.
And so do you think we really need to push ahead with the population of South Australia? Or should we look at stabilising the population and therefore stabilising demand for water?
Well, last time I looked, the world was not suffering from underpopulation. I mean, if you go onto, say, the web and have a look at some of those ecological footprint calculators and put in your own information. I mean, they invite you to put in the lifestyle that you live, the sort of house you live in, the sort of car you drive. And what you'll find is that if everyone was to live like the average South Australian, we'd need about 5 or 6 planet Earths to cope with everyone.
Right.
If everyone was to live like us.
Yes.
So, you know, people say the population problem is a Chinese and an Indian problem. No, the population problem is a first world problem.
Absolutely.
Because we're the ones who are using disproportionate
we're
amounts
the super consumers.
of the world's resources. That's right.
Yes, absolutely. Perhaps one final question. A lot of this has been brought about by the fact that they want to do this huge expansion up at Olympic Dam. The idea being that instead of mining the gold and the uranium, etc., slowly, that we do one big massive grab and rip it all out of the ground as fast as possible. This is probably not good for our children and grandchildren. Do you think this is the path that we should be going, where we are literally grabbing everything today? It's almost as if we don't expect to be around in 50 or 100 years' time.
Well, there is no tomorrow.
There is no tomorrow, yes. Is this industrialisation of Port Lowley perhaps a symptom of a much larger problem that we've got? Grab everything today, bugger tomorrow.
Well, it is an interesting debate. In a wealthy state like South Australia, in a wealthy country like Australia, when is enough enough? Is it endless pursuit of economic growth that should be our aim? When you look at something like the Olympic Dam expansion at Roxby Downs, it's mind-boggling in its size. The company is proposing to create, you know, the world's biggest mine. They're going to have to run a fleet of trucks around the clock for 4 years just to dig the hole before they even get to the ore. And we know when it comes to electricity use that the expanded mine will use more electricity than every single house in Adelaide combined. It is mind-boggling in its size. And the government's very proud of the mining boom. But the question has to be asked, the boom for whom? You know, will the proceeds of the mining boom be invested for future generations? Will it go into a future fund, or will it be frittered by this generation and leave the mess to be cleaned up by the next? I think there's serious questions about the way that we're heading and the government's promotion of the mining boom at all costs. There are going to be impacts. There will be a price to pay, whether it's the state of the Great Artesian Basin and the drawdown of water, whether it's the fate of the cuttlefish because a desalination plant has destroyed their habitat, or whether it's just the decline in these resources so that they're not available for future generations. There are some serious questions here, and we've got to look at the direction that South Australia is heading.
Okay. Mark Parnell, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you.